Island, Part 2, The Sea Cook. Chapter 7, I Go to Bristol. It was longer than the squire imagined ere we were ready for the sea, and none of our first plans, not even Dr. Lavazie's of keeping me beside him, could be carried out as we intended. The doctor had to go to London for a physician to take charge of his practice. The squire was hard at work at Bristol, and I lived on in the hall under the charge of old Redruth, the gamekeeper, almost a prisoner, but full of sea dreams and the most charming anticipations of strange islands and adventures. I brooded by the hour over the map, all the details of which I well remembered. Sitting by the fire in the housekeeper's room, I approached that island in my fancy from every possible direction. I explored every acre of its surface. I climbed 1,000 times to that tall hill they call Spyglass, and from the top enjoyed the most wonderful and changing prospects. Sometimes the isle was thick with savages whom we fought, sometimes full of dangerous animals that hunted us, but in all my fancies nothing occurred to me so strange and tragic as our actual adventures. So the weeks passed on till, one fine day, there came a letter addressed to Dr. Lavazie, with his addition, to be opened, in the case of his absence, by Tom Redruth or young Hawkins. Obeying this order, we found, or rather I found, for the gamekeeper was a poor hand at reading anything but print, the following important news. Old Anchor Inn, Bristol, March 1, 17... Dear Lavazie, I don't know whether you are at the Hall or still in London. I send this in double to both places. The ship is bought and fitted. She lies at anchor, ready for sea. You never imagined a sweeter schooner. A child might sail her, 200 tons, name Hispaniola. I got her through my old friend Blandley, who has proved himself throughout the most surprising trump. The admirable fellow literally slaved in my interest, and so, I may say, did everyone in Bristol as soon as they got wind of the port we sailed for. Treasure, I mean. Redruth, I said, interrupting the letter. Dr. Lavazie will not like that. The squire's been talking, after all. Well, who's better right, growled the gamekeeper. A pretty rum to go if the squire ain't to talk for Lavazie, I should think. And at that I gave up all attempts to commentary and read straight on. Blandley himself found the Hispaniola, and by the most admirable management got her for the merest trifle. There is a class of men in Bristol monstrously prejudiced against Blandley. They go to the length of declaring that this honest creature would do anything for money, that the Hispaniola belonged to him, and that he sold it to me absurdly high. The most transparent calumnies. None of them dare, however, to deny the merits of the ship. So far there was not a hitch. The work people, to be sure, riggers and what not, were most annoyingly slow, but time cured that. It was the crew that troubled me. I wished a round score of men in case of natives, buccaneers, or the odious French, and I had the worry of the deuce's self to find so much as a half-dozen, till the most remarkable stroke of fortune brought me the very man I required. I was standing on the dock when, by the merest accident, I fell in talk with him. I found out he was an old sailor, known at the public house, knew all the seafaring men in Bristol, had lost his health ashore and wanted a good berth as a cook to go to sea again. He had hobbled down there that morning, he said, to get a smell of the salt. I was monstrously touched, so would you have been, and, out of pure pity, I engaged him on the spot to be the ship's cook. Long John Silver, he is called. He has lost a leg, but I have regarded that as a recommendation, since he lost it in his country's service, under the immortal Hawk. He has no pension, Lavazie. Imagine the abominable age we live in. Well, sir, I thought I had only found a cook, but it was a crew I had discovered. Between Silver and myself, we got together in a few days a company of the toughest old salts imaginable. Not pretty to look at, but fellows, by their faces, and the most indomitable spirit. I declare we could fight a frigate. Long John even got rid of 2 out of the 6 or 7 I had already engaged. He showed me in a moment that they were just the sort of freshwater swabs we had fear in adventure of importance. I am in the most magnificent health and spirits, eating like a bull, sleeping like a tree, yet I shall not enjoy a moment till I hear the old tarpaulins trampling round the capstan. Seaward, ho, hang the treasure! It's the glory of the sea that has turned my head. So now, Lavazie, come post. Do not lose an hour, if you respect me. Let young Hawkins go at once to see his mother, for Redruth for a guard, and then both come full speed to Bristol. Drawn Trelawney. Postscript. I did not tell you that Blandley, who, by the way, is to send a consort after us if we don't turn up by the end of August, had found an admirable fellow for sailing master. A stiff man, which I regret, but in all other respects a treasure. Long John Silver unearthed a very competent man for a mate, a man named Arrow. I have a boatswain who pipes Lavezzi, so things shall go man-of-war fashion on board the good ship Hispaniola. I forgot to tell you that Silver is a man of substance. I know of my own knowledge that he has a banker's account, which has never been overdrawn. He leaves his wife to manage the inn, and she is a woman of color. A pair of old bachelors like you and I may be excused for guessing that it is the wife, quite as much as the health, that sends him back to roving. J.T. P.P.S. Hawkins may stay one night with his mother. J.T. You can fancy the excitement into which the letter put me. I was half beside myself with glee, and if I ever despised a man, it was old Tom Redruth, who could do nothing but grumble and lament. Any of the under gamekeepers would have gladly changed places with him, but such was not the squire's pleasure, and the squire's pleasure was like law among them all. Nobody but Redruth would have dared so much as even to grumble. The next morning he and I set out on foot for the Admiral Benbow, and there I found my mother in good health and spirits. The captain who had so long been a cause of so much discomfort was gone where the wicked cease from troubling. The squire had everything repaired and the public rooms and sign repainted, and had added some furniture, above all a beautiful armchair for my mother in the bar. He found her a boy as an apprentice, also so that she would not want for help while I was gone. I was on seeing that the boy that I understood for the first time my situation. I had thought up to that moment of the adventures before me, not at all of the home that I was leaving. And now, at the sight of the clumsy stranger who was to stay here in my place beside my mother, I had my first attack of tears. I am afraid I led that boy a dog's life, for he was new to the work. I had 100 opportunities of setting him right and putting him down, and I was not slow to profit by them. The night passed. The next day after dinner, Redruth and I were afoot again on down the road. I said goodbye to Mother in the cove where I had lived since I was born, and the dear old Admiral Benbow, since he was repainted no longer quite so dear. One of my last thoughts was of the captain, who had so often strode along the beach with his cocked hat, his saber-cut cheek, and his old brass telescope. Next moment we had turned the corner of my home and was out of sight. The mail picked us up about dusk at the Royal George on the Heath. I was wedged in between Redruth and a stout old gentleman, and in spite of the swift motion in the cold night air, I must have dozed a great deal from the very first, and then slept like a log uphill and down dale through stage after stage. For when I was awakened at last, it was by a punch in the ribs, and I opened my eyes to find that we were standing before a large building in a city street, and that the day had already broken a long time. "Where are we?" I asked. "Bristol," said Tom. "Get down." Mr. Trelawney had taken up residence at an inn far down the docks to superintend the work upon the schooner. Thither we now had to walk, and our way, to my great delight, lay along the quays and beside the great multitude of ships of all sizes and rigs and nations. In one, sailors were singing their work. In another, there were men aloft, high over my head, hanging to threads that seemed no thicker than a spider's. Though I had lived by the shore all my life, I had never seemed to have been near the sea till then. The smell of tar and salt was something new. I saw the most wonderful figureheads that had all been far over the ocean. I saw, besides many old ships with rings in their ears, besides many old sailors with rings in their ears and whiskers curled into ringlets and tarry pigtails, and their swaggering, clumsy sea walk. And if I had seen as many kings or archbishops, I could not have been more delighted. And I was going to see myself, to sea in a schooner with a piping boatswain and a pigtailed singing seaman to sea, bound for an unknown island and to seek for buried treasure. While I was still in this delightful dream, we came suddenly in front of a large inn and met with Squire Trelawney, all dressed out like a sea officer in stout blue cloth, coming out of the door with a smile on his face and a capital imitation of a sailor's walk. "Here you are," he cried, "and the doctor came last night from London. Bravo, the ship's company is complete." "Oh, sir," cried I, "when do we sail?" "Sail," he says, "we sail tomorrow." This is the end of chapter 7. Now, one of the things was in the letter, I kind of mumbled the year. March 1st, 17. The thing is that in the book, it was 17 underscore. And that was a common thing that was done in books of this time, about this time, before and after, where if there was a name, if there was a date, if there was something, the first letter was given and it was just blanked out the rest. So it was either to avoid slander issues, because, if you said something bad about somebody, then they could sue you for slander and take all of your money, and writers didn't have much money then, and most of them don't have much money now. Or they could get in trouble, friends come looking for them. Similar thing was done with dates, where they would give like the beginning of the year. So it gives it a sense of being now. Because this was written right around then. This was written a little bit after. And so he said 17. So it could have been at the beginning of the century, could have been at the end of the century, could have been, somewhere in between. So the reader doesn't know. But it's to give the impression of a little bit ago and not happening at a particular time, because, the kayfabe behind that is that we're hiding this for important legal reasons or hiding it for other reasons. But the truth is that no, this is just a way to make people think that it's real, but it isn't. Let's see, what else? Yes. So Squire Trelawney, just as Dr. Levese thought, blabbed his mouth, said, "Oh yes, we're off for treasure." And so he all of a sudden got somebody to give him a ship for a really cheap price, maybe. Sounds like Squire Trelawney doesn't necessarily know what ship should be going for. And they never said the amount, but everyone's telling him that he got taken. But he insists, and his friend insists, that he got a good deal. So it's like, if you think you have a good deal, first count your fingers, then count your toes, then count your relatives, and are you sure you got a good deal? That last bit, count your fingers, count your toes, count your relatives, is from a series of books called Myth Adventures. It's a whole series of them. It's a really fun book. Maybe I'll get you copies of them when you're older. Maybe I'll give you my copies when you're older. I don't know. I don't know if I can find them. Maybe your dad has them. Anyway, so here we have Squire Trelawney, who told everybody, "Oh yeah, going for gold." And now he has a cook friend, Long John Silver, just like the restaurant. The restaurant was named for this character, the cook on the ship. So we have a restaurant named for the cook on the ship. He's the main character or he's a focal character of the book. Jim Hawkins is, I guess, the main character, the narrator, but Long John Silver really is like the focus of the story. And we get him introduced. This is part 2, the sea cook. So, this is kind of about him, and here we meet him, and he only has one leg. Gee, where have I heard about a seaman with only one leg? I wonder if this is important. Anyway, we shall find out.